This is Sales Management Mastery, Episode 12.
Welcome to Sales Management Mastery, where you get an insider's look on how to build, motivate, coach, and lead a high-performance, low-maintenance sales team. Here's your host, Ralph Burns.
Hello and welcome to Sales Management Mastery Online at salesmanagementmastery.com. And we're here to help you and your sales managers build a team of highly motivated elite salespeople using easy-to-use real-world sales management techniques and tactics that'll unleash a flood of new sales for your sales organization. On this episode of Sales Management Mastery, we delve deep into how to motivate your sales team by discussing the 7 forces of sales motivation. This is part 1 of a 2-part series on the psychology behind motivating. Now, I'd also like to remind you that if you'd like to get a jump start on creating your own team of supercharged salespeople using our proven system, you can claim your free training course of your choice, including our most popular training of all time, How to Motivate Your Sales Team to Peak Performance, at the Sales Management Mastery Academy by going to salestraininggift.com. Now, no one has gotten more press on motivation over the course of time than Abraham Maslow. Now, each person, as we know, is truly motivated by a series of, first off, physiological, then safety, then security, and belonging needs, which Maslow goes into in his needs hierarchy theory, which, as many of you are probably aware of, the needs listed from basic, kind of the lowest to earliest motivations are physiology, hunger, thirst, sleep, then safety, security, shelter, and health, then belongingness, love, friendship, then self-esteem, then what he calls self-actualization. So there's lots of theories that go around exactly what motivates human beings. And in this show here today, we're going to get into what motivates your salespeople, and specifically how you can use those motivations to become a top-performing sales manager, or if you're a general manager, to help your sales managers use these 7 forces of motivation to get the best out of your sales team and to drive your sales revenues. So there's no question about it that every person is motivated differently. And even though Maslow certainly elucidates 5 individual characteristics in which we're all motivated by, the bottom line is this, is that I'm motivated differently than you are based upon these sort of intrinsic factors that we call the 7 forces of motivation, which we'll get into here just in a second. So, and likewise, your salespeople are motivated differently too. Now, there's an infinite number of combinations that exist that motivate each individual salesperson. And then in our 10 questions, which we outlined a few shows ago, we told you that the basics of motivation are really centered around figuring out what makes your salespeople tick. Now, at a very base level, those 10 questions are extremely effective at you figuring out what really does motivate them from a business standpoint, from a sales standpoint. But in this, we're going to get into a little bit deeper in these 7 forces of motivation so that you become a true sales motivational master in the process. Now, the interesting part is that the forces that motivated you as well as your salespeople when they were kids are the exact same motivations that motivate them today. Now, that's an important point to remember. What motivated them when they were children are still the same inherent motivations that motivate them today. So if you can tap into those, you are that much closer to becoming a real motivational master of your sales force. So, for example, let's just use a personal example here. And this might be different, obviously, for you, but for example, I am primarily motivated by what's known as autonomy, the need for autonomy. And there's nothing that makes me happier than sort of singly tackling a project and seeing it to its ultimate completion, basically due to my efforts. So when I was a kid, I played and I worked and I learned primarily on my own. And although I love to be in groups, not typically in large groups, but in groups, just in smaller groups of close friends, it's not really my preferred way of living, as well as it's not my preferred way of working and how to achieve any sort of career success. So I was never really much of a quote-unquote team-oriented worker in college and neither in the corporate world, which didn't say that I didn't like being on teams, but I was not primarily motivated by the goals of a team. I was really more motivated by my own individual goals. So I prefer to do it on my own and rarely asking for advice, if ever at all. So, in fact, the formation of this present sales training company, in which you are listening to some of our free material from, is proof positive of my sort of autonomous, do it on my own kind of nature. So this might be the same case for you. It might be different for you, but this is one of the 7 forces of motivation that's an overpowering force for me to create the motivation that I have to do the things that I want to do in my life. So let's get right into the 7 forces of motivation that inspire not only salespeople, but also human beings in general. And like I said before, everyone is inspired by in some part of each motivator here, but the extent in which each is most relevant creates a motivational profile, as it were, that's really unique for each individual person. So I've arranged them here in relative proportions to the typical sales profile. So let's get right through them. We're going to get through the first half of them here on this show and finish this up on our second show and our conclusion show on the 7 forces of motivation. So number 1 is the need for belonging. Number 2 is the need for independence. Number 3 is the need for importance. Number 4 is the need for knowledge. Number 5 is the need for assertiveness. Number 6 is the need for recognition. And number 7 is the need for affiliation. So let's get right into the first 3 here of the 7 forces of motivation. First off is the need for belonging. And these salespeople are happiest when they're surrounded by people and are in group environments. And they're not typically autonomous types of individuals and not prone to solitary activities. But this sales rep prefers starting and maintaining relationships, which usually keeps them in these relationships for a long time. They actually tend to these relationships for a fairly long time after their meeting. And they love team selling and group presentations. Now, this is a very, very common way in which a lot of companies are selling these days, particularly in the medical field and in the pharmaceutical industry in general, although some models are changing back to a singular model. But group selling is a very common thing in sales these days. Now, this is the type of person that this sort of selling environment is ideal. But if they're in a solitary sales environment, the chances are they're probably not going to be as successful. But this need for belonging and to interact and to be in groups with others makes them happiest. Oftentimes, this is the solitary salesperson that really enjoys going into offices where there's large groups of people and entertaining and bringing in lunch, or maybe entertaining at nighttime with large groups of clients, office staff and customers and decision makers, that sort of thing. They really love to be in groups, especially the larger the group, the better. So those people are primarily motivated by this feeling of belonging. If I'm not in a larger group, I don't feel self-satisfied. I don't feel even close to being, to pardon the phrase, to borrow the phrase from Maslow, to self-actualization when they are in larger groups. So that's belonging, which is the first force of motivation. Number 2 is independence. And this sales rep is sort of the lone wolf. It's the opposite of those who are in the first